Hi, my name is Moira. I'm the researcher for the Victorian Presbyterian Church and Nation Committee. We've made this video because the Victorian Parliament is just about to put up a bill that sounds wonderful, but will actually criminalise ordinary Christian practice and make raising our children according to the Bible illegal. It sounds far-fetched, but it has already happened in the ACT and Queensland. I'm talking about so-called conversion therapy bans. Now, when we hear the phrase conversion therapy, we usually think of horrible physical and psychological torture. But of course, those awful practices of the past, like shame-based counselling or forced electroshock therapy, hormones, even rape, they have all thankfully been illegal or out of practice in Australia for decades. I'd like to introduce you to Leah, who has personal experience in this area, to help us understand just what is at stake if this legislation goes through. Thanks for joining us, Leah. Can you please tell us a bit about yourself and why this legislation is concerning to you?
Yeah, hi Maura. Thank you for this opportunity to be able to speak to you. So yes, despite growing up in the church, I've experienced what is now known today as gender dysphoria at a young age. And then in my early teens, I became aware of some same-sex attraction and ended up being involved in lesbian relationships. But through a very long journey, however, I was able to walk away from that life with the help and support of ministries and people of faith and Christian counselling. And so while the church in the past has done some mistakes with these issues, I can testify, as well as many others that I know, to the helpfulness of the biblical counselling that we voluntarily were able to access. So yeah, this legislation really concerns me because while it is claiming to ban those horrible practices that you mentioned, and they don't exist anymore, the conversion therapy definition has also included practices such as prayer and biblical counselling, Christian support, etc. So as a result, this legislation will ban the many forms of help that were essential to my journey to freedom. So to deny people the opportunity to seek this within their church environment, or even with someone who may have experience in this area, is completely demoralising to someone in this position. And this obviously impacts the ministries themselves that offer this support and help to these people, as they can be prosecuted under this legislation simply for having such services available. So if Victoria was to apply the penalties that the ACT has legislated, then the ministries could face up to $24,000 of fines or up to 18 months in jail.
That's just incredible. Now, this legislation isn't only bad for adults who are seeking help for unwanted same-sex attraction or gender confusion, and all the Christians who might try to help them. It's also bad for children and families. Isn't that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I fear that the children actually will lose out most in all of this legislation. With the amount of sexualisation that children are already exposed to these days, and the LGBT ideology that's just around in general, but in our education systems, we're seeing an increase in the numbers of children who are confused with their sexuality and their gender. And so instead of taking the watch and wait approach, which actually sees most children return to their biological gender, as it did with me, children instead are being channeled into these gender clinics, and at an early age are being given hormone blockers, then cross-sex hormones, and then later in their teens, gender reassignment surgery. So, and they all have terrible effects and irreversible damage. But the sad reality is that they have not been informed of all the options, and they've just been channeled to one direction, and they're not told of the potential risks and outcomes prior to undergoing transition. So yeah, it's quite catastrophic, but parents as well will lose the right to provide Christian instruction and their desired medical care for their own children. I know even a case in another state in Australia where a couple has lost custody of their teenage daughter, and she is now the ward of the state, and now being referred to as a he. So terrible circumstances for parents who want the best for their children.
It's so terrifying. And what is likely to happen to doctors and psychologists, teachers, etc., whose professional opinions and consciences cause them to contradict this legislation as part of their jobs or even just in conversations?
Yeah, so for many of the occupations you've mentioned, the refusal to promote transgenderism or homosexuality as a healthy and positive life will result in the loss of licenses and fines, as I've mentioned. So, yeah, they really will be unable to treat their patients or clients from a biblical or even a conservative approach, even if the patient requests this approach. And Christian or religious schools would have difficulty teaching, for instance, God's intention for human sexuality, or even that there are only two genders. Pastors as well will be unable to teach the biblical view on sexuality, gender, and marriage. So it really spans across many occupations. Yeah, and as you say, even our freedom of speech is under threat, with the potential for our general conversations to be interpreted as an attempt to convert someone's sexuality or gender. And I guess all you need is someone who's willing to press those charges and make a complaint to the commission, and you could be prosecuted. So it's very serious.
And as we have seen in other states, your right to freedom of religion and freedom of speech will be abolished under these types of laws. Just thank you so much, Leah. Now, we only have a very short window of time to prevent these laws from being passed in Victoria. And as it stands, the Labor Party looks like they've got the numbers that they need to pass this bill, unless we persuade a few key MPs in the upper house and the Liberal Party to vote against it. So we want to encourage members of our church to take urgent action on this issue. So first of all, we'd ask you just to visit the Church and Nation website to find out the contact details for those key MPs and to send a few emails this week. It'll take you 10 minutes. But also you can support Leah's work over at Cause, which I'll let her tell us a bit more about.
Yeah, so we've initiated an online study called Free to Change. This study has gathered data and stories from those of us who have benefited from such therapies and support. And so far we have 70 individuals who have contributed, and the results are undeniable, and they show that rather than causing harm, faithful Christian approaches to sexuality and gender actually bring many benefits to those who struggle with these issues. So, yeah, the results that are highlighted just quickly are that change is possible. So nearly all of our participants reported improvements in anxiety, depression, suicide ideation, and healthy relationships, etc. Secondly, that professional and religious counselling helped to achieve those changes. And thirdly, that these changes they're not temporary, they're in fact long lasting. So we'll use this quality data as evidence to help justify our stance against this legislation. And yeah, if you are interested in more results of this study, then you can go to our website and you can hear the stories and read the testimonies from people who have had these wonderful life changes. So please look at our website and share it with as many people as possible. And as Moira said, if you want to contact your MP, that would be great. But if you're unsure what to specifically say to your MPs, then we've prepared a list of key points of concern regarding this legislation that you can sort of be guided by. You can find them on our website as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Leah. And of course, it goes without saying, but let's never leave it unsaid, is that we all need to be praying that no conversion therapy ban legislation succeeds in Victoria. Thank you all for your attention.